Hello and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran,
I'm Deshaun Vasquez.
and today we're gonna do something of a monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. We're serious. We're inspired by one of our favorite channels on the whole of the world, the internet, but like the whole of the world. Like one of my favorite content creators, Cinemassacre, James Ralph, did this great episode, a part of his Monster Madness that he does every year, where he goes through his favorite monsters, category by category, picking his favorite with his buddy. And you know what? That sounded so much fun. We had to do it.
Yeah, we just want to just steal that, but at least we're admitting it.
Yeah, but also credit him, and also please go watch him. If you're not watching Cinemassacre, you're missing out on some of the funniest, greatest movie culture content that's out there. If you
Yeah,
like us, you will like Cinemassacre. But
and
that's
James
not an
Ruff is
official sponsor or anything like that. We just
yeah,
love him. We
we
just
just love
absolutely
him,
love him.
and it's good to like support his non-AVGN like related projects since AVGN
Exactly.
is the thing that brings in the most that brings in the cash, but his horror related stuff has always been fun, and I always look forward to in October where he uploads videos.
Exactly. But we thought this idea was really great. We're going to basically go through 9 or 10 categories. What did we finally settle on? A bunch of categories. We didn't
Yeah,
go
like 11.
11 categories. We're not going through every one that he goes through, but we want to go through some of our favorites and kind of discuss what makes them our favorites, and what makes these monsters great. Deshaun, what do you what's something you look for in a great monster? Because I feel like that's right off important to this discussion.
Instinctually, I would say something unique, but unique is always a loaded term, especially when it comes to a horror, the horror genre, because it goes to that old argument of just like there's no new ideas. It's always the same handful of ideas. It's just a matter of execution. So you can go back and forth on that. But it's more or less just something that gives you a primal fear where the idea is sometimes scary on its own without even having to see the creature.
Yeah, yeah. I believe. Uh, but that's the thing, is I disagree with that. I think that sometimes it's really fun to see the creature, and to have a good creature matters most. Because sure, it's fun to not see the creature and not see it coming, but also the most fun part of Jaws, other than the tension of not seeing the shark, is the end when you see the shark. Like
Well, there's always
that's
the payoff.
there's always the
But it
payoff.
always
And
tends to work better if you can show it as little as possible and it still has a good effect.
yes, exactly. I feel like a good monster has elements to it that are creepy until you see the full thing, and then it still works. Like that's important.
Mhm.
And it leads to iconography and how you end up with franchises. Like in endless movies is you get a good monster and you run with it. Or a bad monster, that also happens. and we will be
Yeah,
talking about that.
it isn't mutually exclusive.
No, yeah, exactly. There's some favorites on this list that aren't exactly good, but they're awesome, and that's
Mm.
why I will choose them. And please, in the comments, let us know what is your favorites on this list. If we say something and you're just like, what? How is that even a thing? Like, please let us know in the comments down below. If you are watching on YouTube or anywhere with its audio only, please let us know. So let's break it down. Deshaun, what's first?
In no particular order, because we like scrambled together this list and I didn't feel like organizing it alphabetically. We can start off with vampires.
Vampires. So I know you've been deep diving on vampires lately. You just read Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, I just finished reading it or listening to it if you want to be that guy, and rewatching the movie for the first time in a good while.
Nice, nice, nice. I'm a huge vampire fan from way back. I have been uh uh a vampire head for a very long time. I think it's something my mom's likes the genre of vampires, and like it just stems from that. Is that like I've always been like, yeah, vampires are cool. Let's read any vampire thing. And, you know, I'm one of those kids that was like actually like upset about Edward when I like. So I, as a vampire fan, as a young vampire fan, I would read anything vampirish. So I picked up Twilight being like, it's a vampire story. Everyone's talking about it. I will read it. And I literally threw the book across the room when he started to sparkle in the sunlight. Literally just like picked it up and was like, fuck no, and just threw it across the room and was just like, that's not, no. Like, and I was okay with everything up to that point. I was like, okay, you know, yeah, he's a vampire and they're in not sunny, you know, Seattle or something. And, you know, like, and you're just like, cool, I guess. And I was okay with it until that point. And then I was just like, I feel like with certain rules of vampires, there's fun twists, and then there's just twists that don't add anything but just trying to be contradictory, you know, like.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you wanted to have it, but you didn't want to have like the consequences of it. It's in the same way that like these movies, even besides the Twilight movies, like the Underworld movies,
Yes.
are super dumb. They're
Yep.
fun for what they are, but they're super.
They're fun for what they are.
But they only really use vampires as an excuse to have semi-superpowered beings to do cool shit. So you're only just kind of using that just to have what you want, to cherry pick out of it, but not actually.
It makes
really
it a fantasy universe. I think that's what they were always going for anyways. It's not really a horror movie because those aren't horror movies. Those are more fantasy movies, you know, like they're action fantasy movies. Which there's plenty of vampire movies which are just action movies, which they're just using vampires as an excuse, you know. Like there's just so many that you're like Priest, you're just like, wait, what? You know, like
the Paul Bettany Priest, is that what you're talking about? I forgot that was the thing.
Yeah, no, it was, I think it's on Hulu, and I saw it and I was like, oh, memories. But you know,
the thing I was like, Paul Bettany was worried like he wouldn't have a career, and then Vision came around, just like, okay, good.
Never mind. You know, like Disney money just came in. That's what it was. You know, that sprinkled that Disney money like Salt Bay, just like that. But let's actually go into the ones we like. So my first like favorite vampire, and first one that like really captured my imagination on the twists and kind of leading into the lore, is Stephen King's Salem's Lot. I love the vampires in Salem's Lot. And we're talking book and movie and the TV movie. But I love this book, and I was a big fan of the movie too. It's very creepy. I think that the iconic scene is the little kid vampire knocking on the window trying to get in, you know, asking permission to get into the house. It's those things that like I love that, you know, Stephen King goes fantastic with the vampires and leans into it, but also does small twists to make them fun and different, and also makes you like think about it, you know, like
a little weirder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Dr. Sleep also the villains in Dr. Sleep are also sort of kind of vampires. Sort of kinda.
Huh?
But it's like they don't drink blood, they more like steal the energy from you, the life force.
Like what we do in the shadows. What's his name?
Colin Robinson.
Colin Robinson.
Not so much like that, because it's not about like vibes or straight up energy. It's like people have energy they call it the steam, or it's basically the shining, and they kind of steal the shining out of other people to sustain themselves. It's really interesting. They're technically vampires, but they're definitely like in their own box. They're an outlier. But it's weird. It's very Stephen King.
So I gotta let me try to read your mind here. Is your favorite vampire? Let the right one in.
Ellie?
Ellie.
No, I wouldn't say so. I
Really?
do
Because that's
I
one of your favorite movies.
That is
That's
one of my favorite movies, but it doesn't necessarily make for, like, my favorite vampire. I would have
okay.
to separate the 2 between, like, what vampires I actually find intimidating or a threatening force, and versus what vampires I just like as characters, because you have the advantage of that with vampires is that they don't necessarily need to be scary.
No.
It can be a huge, like, character study about the nuance of, like, what it means to be immortal, like Interview with the Vampire.
That
None of that.
or it's about sexuality, which is
Yeah,
I
that
think
too.
very important to vampirism is that it's a monster that seduces most of its
Mhm.
victims. It is not a monster that, Swamp Thing it comes in, picks a lady out of a boat, like this is a guy who shows up and seduces his way into the house. He has to be let in and then he has to like he kind of like tricks all his victims. This is straight from Dracula and Nosferatu. Like Nosferatu's not pretty, but he still, gets the ladies. But
Count Orlok, by the way, not Nosferatu.
what?
I'm doing the Frankenstein's monster thing. His name is not Nosferatu. His name is Count Orlok.
Yes, you're right. You're right. You're right. I'm just trying to talk to the
I
moving
know what
on.
you're trying to say. Don't enunciate it. It's fine. Don't actually put it out there.
So, what is your favorite vampire then?
As far as scary, I do like going a little classic. It is a toss up between like I love Lugosi's Dracula.
Oh.
I love Christopher Lee's Dracula. Amongst the Draculas, as far as intimidation is concerned, even though it's not a perfect movie, I really love Gary Oldman's Dracula.
I mean, it is not a perfect movie. I do, you know my opinion on this. I do
Yeah,
not like, and I'm a, like, that's Francis Ford Coppola, right? That's,
yeah.
yeah. It's like I'm a big Francis Ford Coppola fan. Like, I'm a huge apologist for Francis Ford Coppola. I'm always just like, he was great earlier, and he's not so great now, but he's still making art, and that's important. But like, but that's I do not like that Dracula. I can't get through it. It's just it's hard for me. I've seen it, of course, all the way through, but I don't like watching it because it's just not. I don't know. It's too much for me. I think it's
But
too.
that's as far as like the intimidation factor. Like I
I
like
mean,
his
Gary Oldman's good.
yeah.
That's the thing. Is Gary Oldman is fantastic as Dracula.
And you have like more shape shifting aspects and stuff like that.
And that means that he's going against, Bela Lugosi and Christopher Lee, which are titans, like
Mhm.
are icons, like, and still Gary Oldman is fantastic in this. His makeup's not so much, but he is, like,
Yeah,
uh,
I like the makeup. I think the only big thing that people get bothered with is like the wig in that first like old man form.
yes, yeah, and his bald head. It's weird. It's like up here, like and you're just like,
Yeah, it
oh,
makes it look much bigger than it is.
yeah,
But that's as far as like actually potentially intimidating vampires. Anything else are ones that tend to be have a more transformative aspect where they
okay,
have the more humanoid looking form and you can either pull a Buffy and have like bumpy ridges on the forehead or you can actually have a full on like ghoulish form which you tend to see in like RPGs and shit.
yeah,
As far as a vampire for a character, it would probably actually be Kane from the Legacy of Kane games. That's
really,
not a scary type thing, but that's more of a great character
a
study, and
great
that's
character.
also a game about a vampire in which the story is about the nature of immortality.
Yeah, exactly. I also have to give a shout out to American Vampire for being the best vampire in comics. I
Inner
got Yeah, Singer Sweet. I was about to say. I was like, please remember the name. Singer Sweet is fantastic, and it's also American Vampire is one of the most imaginative takes on the vampire genre. And if you're not reading what's the end of American Vampire right now, you're gonna miss out because it's
Yeah,
so good.
the first issue of 1976 just came out like a week or so
Yup.
ago. It is ending soon. It's funny we bring up American Vampire. I have been waiting for my volumes for it to show up. I bought it off from like a third party company,
Oh,
and
nice.
but they got hit with COVID pretty bad.
Oh.
So there have been like delays all around. I ordered those fucking things like 2 months ago.
You're like, just give me my American Vampire.
I'm still waiting for it. But I have like volume 6 of all of them because that was the only one they didn't have. So I just got that off of Amazon. So I
Nice.
just have volume 6 on my shelf by itself, and it's really
Oh no.
bothering me.
Oh no, that's terrible. That's always the worst. You're like, son of a bitch. You're like, I just want to complete it.
Yeah, because now that it's ending, I want to do like a big revisit.
Oh yeah, me too. I agree. I would like to read the whole thing through. I think I think you call out one of the best vampires in video games. We brought up some of the best vampires in film, and now we bring it up in comics. You know, like, is there any other genre we are missing vampires from? TV? I already said Salem's Lot. So, but you love. I know you're a Buffy fan, and
Yeah, I'm a big Buffy fan, but that's one of those things where Buffy covers a lot of different monsters.
yeah,
It does start off with primarily vampires. The first season's very like villain of the week, just like, oh, it's like, oh man, the football team got turned into creatures from the back lagoon. Oh no. And then like season 2 onwards was when they had more of a narrative focus and kind of hit the ground running. And while there are pretty frightening scenes with the vampires, it's also one of those things where when you make them so much of a recurring thing, especially 2 of which become part of the
yeah,
recurring cast, it sort of eliminates the like scare factor,
danger.
but then that leads more into like the character study stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if there's many good TV vampires. I know there's like there's some good stuff, but like overall, TV horror is rough. You know, like
This
that.
this tracks into video games as well, but the way Dracula is portrayed in the Castlevania series is very good.
Yes, yes. Oh, so and I mean, then you bring that to TV with the Netflix series.
Yeah,
So another win for the Castlevania series, baby. That the best video game content ever. Like, like
adaptation
like
that doesn't make me mad. Imagine that.
imagine that. Oh, did you hear? I was so angry. Dragon's Dogma came out on Netflix, and I
Yeah,
watched
I
a
heard it was bad.
preview, and it
I
just
heard it
looks
was bad.
bad. And then I watched Mother's Basement review on it, and he just tore it apart, and I was like, oh my god, this seems so bad. I'm just not gonna watch it. I love Dragon's Dogma. That is an off-topic discussion, but oh my god, I'm so angry that Netflix is just like, hey, we can make more video game content, but let's not put any care or love into it. And they're like, nice. Like they're just like, nice, nice, nice. Oh god, that's I mean they like follow some of the game elements, but in such a way that like the Sonic movie followed game elements. And you're just like I
Meaning not at all?
yes, like in that it's in your face that the game element's there, but they're not doing it, like, and you're like,
So
stand.
it's just like something wholly generic, but they sprinkle in a little stuff to remind you about the game you would much rather just be playing instead of
Yes.
watching the.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. But moving on from vampires, who's next on our list?
Zombies.
Zombies. So this is a hard one to point out one zombie, but I think you got to give who's your favorite zombies, and then you have to discuss slow versus fast. Deshaun, slow versus fast.
Slow versus fast. I don't really care either way. It's all about like what the context is and what type of story you're trying to tell. I
Yeah,
do think we've gone a little crazy with like the running zombies, like post like remake of Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later,
they don't
because
all
at
have to
that
run.
time, yeah,
You know.
at that time it felt refreshing because zombies had become sort of a joke at that point. It's like, oh, you could always get away from them; they can never get you, etc. When that was never always necessarily the point.
Yeah, exactly. It's like so the point for me for zombies. I'm a horror fan from way back, and I'm more of a monster fan, like, so I had a book that was all the zombie movies that have ever come out. It was huge. It was like this thick. I think I got it down here somewhere, but I'm not gonna pick it out. But it's a huge, thick book of zombies, and I went through a lot of zombie films at the time, and to be real, the real frightening thing about zombies is that they just keep coming. Like that's it's more that they're a force of nature more than they are a monster.
Yeah.
Like it's that it's impending. It's never it's eventual. It's never, you're never going to actually get away. That's why I always feel when a zombie movie ends with like good things or them defeating the zombies, I'm always just like, eh, like,
Yeah.
like
And just as a creature, they work as a blank canvas for pretty much whatever you want to tell, which is
yeah,
why they use so often.
yeah,
You have
exactly.
like the tension of like race relations and like the original Night of the Living Dead. You have the consumerism like metaphor in the George Romero films, especially Dawn.
Yeah, especially Dawn. And I feel like it them running does add an extra thing, but it also is unnecessary because they are still going to get you, like that's not like if they're able to take over the whole world, that like that's not, like there's nothing you can do, like, and that's what's always the frightening part is the existential question of like, what do you do when the world's ending and it's slowly closing in on you constantly, like, and what happens to humans when they're pushed that far. I think that's why Night of the Living Dead is still good today, and I will call Night of the Living Dead the king of all the zombie movies, because as much as I love a modern zombie movie and I love blood, guts, gore, like Night of the Living Dead captures so much of what is right about zombies. And of course, it's not the first zombie movie. Like if you're a dummy and you're like, wow, that's just the first zombie movie, you're like, no. Zombies have been happening in movies since like 1905.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, you can argue the Frankenstein monster is a zombie.
Yeah.
Like if
You can argue that Jason's a zombie at a point, so it's like it's hard to pick a zombie, but I do think movie wise best movie about zombies is Night of the Living Dead.
I would
I
say
think,
so.
yeah, I think it just holds it, and it's still somehow very watchable now. Even if you want to watch I think the '90s remake is just as good
Yeah, the
too.
one that Tom Savini directed. It is good.
It is really good. I don't know if it feels the same, but it definitely captures all the same energy. Like it's like it may not be the same thing, but it does capture it all. But I also it's rough to choose a favorite zombie out of all of them.
Uh, I'm torn between because you can split it up into like it doesn't necessarily have to be a singular zombie specifically,
Yeah.
or it could be just a type of zombie. I start to lean more towards video games for the most part. I would think.
Yeah,
As
because
far
they
as
get more creative with zombies. I believe the most creative innovations in zombie lore has happened in video games. Because they have to expand on so many different types of zombies. Like that's what it comes down to.
what I need because modern zombies, for the most part, like I kind of get real sick of because it's bringing nothing. For the most part, it rarely brings anything new to the table that I haven't seen done better in older iterations.
Yeah.
So even if it's like a simple gimmick, it's sometimes enough to just to bring that up a little bit for me to make me more interested. Like I would think, like the infected from The Last of Us.
Yes. The effective
Like
on The Last of Us, it being a spore, like
they're zombies, they're infected style zombies, but the idea that it's based on insect cordyceps, so it's like a fungus that infects you and hollows out your brain and like controls you to spread, and
ugh.
there are different levels based on how long you've stayed infected,
Yeah, that
and
that type of stuff is
you're just like covered in mold and like mushrooms and stuff. You're just like, that's a great thing where they function essentially the same way as other zombies and they have like super powered forms like Resident Evil or Left 4 Dead would. But
yeah.
just by adding that cordyceps gimmick, like it just makes it so much more
It
interesting.
does. It does. And
Little aesthetic tweak, and you have something good.
not only is it cool looking, but it's like a cool concept, and it's sort of based on real life. That like that's the fucked up part is that there
Yeah,
is.
are a real thing. It's just one of those things where, and look it up, it's really fucked up. It's just one of those things where like, what if it jumped to humans?
Yeah, right. You're just like,
What if it just made that leap?
so it's just like, no, please don't do
How about
that.
maybe not?
Yeah, how about no? Uh,
As far
and,
as
it definitely stands out as being some of the best zombies in video games. Last of Us.
As far as movies go, I do love the way the zombies are portrayed in Return of the Living Dead. Return of the
Yeah,
Living Dead is silly as hell,
silly as
but
hell.
I still always remember like the tar zombie from that.
I also have to give a shout out to Hugh Brain Dead. Am I saying that
Oh,
right?
Peter Jackson one?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
Peter
Brain Dead
Jackson.
or Dead Alive, depending on
Yep.
like the area.
I love that movie for its zombie action. You know, like sometimes it's not like the zombies themselves that are fun, it's the dismembering of the zombies that is fun. And I feel like that movie really leans into that shit and has a good time with with its
Yeah,
zombies.
I would say so. The thing I was liking about Return of the Living Dead, though, was that even that early on, when that movie came out in the 80s, it was
Yeah.
already trying to like turn the genre on its head. Like
Yeah.
these zombies are mobile, they're intelligent, they can speak. And it's funny because no one really thinks about this movie in the same way that they do for like Night of the Living Dead. But this was the movie that popularized the terms, the thing with zombies liking or wanting
Yeah,
brains.
brains. Yeah, yeah. It really is. I just find them so silly. Those movies, you know, like I do like them, but they are like they're silly, and you know, like the zombies talking is always silly to me.
The tar zombie in that movie is still pretty creepy, though.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
that great aesthetic with like the melted face and the big eyes and the jaw, and it's like completely
No,
skeletal. And they just
the effects are top notch. You know, like no
and
question.
despite how silly it is, they still have like really fucked up sensibilities. Like when they're interrogating the remains of the top half of a zombie, and they're just like, "Why do you like brains?" Just like it makes the pain go away, and you're like, "Jesus."
I know you're like, hey, okay.
All right.
But I really I feel like we could do all day about zombies. So I feel like we have to move on. What is the next monster?
Next up is a mummy, which you could argue is kind of the same thing.
It's yeah. So what makes a mummy to you, Deshaun? Because I feel like there's a very distinct thing that makes it a mummy.
I think it tends to just be like the Egyptian like aesthetic and the fact that it was like that preparation. So you get the bandages or you get like the costuming, that kind of thing.
Which Egyptians weren't the only people who mummified, but
Yep.
it is definitely so. I don't think it has to be Egyptian, but I feel like you have to. It has to be a mummification,
Yeah.
either alive or dead. You know, like to make it, you know, a mummy.
It's kind of like that's it's kind of like a square rectangle situation.
So this one's a hard for me because I'm a big Universal monster fan. So when I love my mummy, it's the mummy. You know, like it's the original. It's
Boris Karloff.
yeah, it's Boris Karloff because first off, Boris Karloff's fucking chin. It is just somehow it's intimidating. You know, like he as the mummy, he's just like it's cut and somehow fucking scary and like he doesn't really do much. You know, like he doesn't have to bring too much to this role, and he still makes this. And I think Boris Karloff is fantastic as the mummy here, and I think a lot of people in this category will immediately go to the Brendan Fraser remake. I like those movies as adventure movies, and
Yeah,
that's
same.
what a mummy movie should be. Is sort of more of an adventure.
Yeah, those movies are more or less like an Indiana Jones type thing, but with like supernatural elements,
Exactly.
or supernatural elements that are more at the forefront.
Exactly. I agree. It's that, and that's the thing is, are mummies scary? Not too much, you know. Like it has to. They have to. It's about the magic they bring that can be scary, you know, like
Yeah.
or creepy. I think. And there hasn't been much innovation on this front. We had the Tom Cruise The Mummy, and that was bad. You know, like, and there hasn't been many mummy movies because it's a hard property. But it, as every other Universal monster property, it is available to the public. So people, you can make your Egyptian movie. You can do your mummy movie if you feel like it.
Yeah, I feel like it's one that we haven't really tapped as much as we should have
Yeah.
because we're still trying to like chase that same zeitgeist that was popularized by usually the Egyptian aesthetic and just kind of going from the same tired, just like, well, it's basically a rotting corpse in bandages.
Yeah.
I, f- I feel like at some point we'll have someone come in and really give us a take.
Yeah. And please, guys, if you have one that is a good take, please let us know. We want to know. We want to hear it. I do love. I'm a big League of Extraordinary Gentlemen fan, and I know in the movies they don't have the mummy, but they do have the mummy in the books, and I do like the mummy in the book. But that's not here nor there.
That's an example for comics, I guess, if you
Oh,
want to go
but
for like
what
characters.
did we have a mummy in what was that? The Frankenstein
And
group?
the Agents of Shade.
Yeah, Agent Shade. Was there mummy in that? I
I can't
remember.
remember if it was.
I
Because
love
to
that
be
book.
fair, though, yeah, so do I. I remember, but to be fair, anyone that wasn't like Frank himself, for
Was
the most part,
disposable.
just kind of part of the crew.
Yeah, they were like Suicide Squad, where it was just like they're going down. If they're on Frankenstein's crew, they're dead. Like they ain't going. They ain't surviving.
There goes. We have this on a category, but there you are for a best Frankenstein's monster. It's the DC Comics
Did
Frankenstein.
we even have that as a category? But yes. If we're talking best Frankenstein's, I'm not gonna tell you De Niro. I do like De Niro's take.
Performance is really good in that film, and it's nice to at least have, despite that movie's problems, at least an attempt to be a faithful adaptation of the book.
Yeah,
Especially for someone who really loves that book.
exactly. But I think if we're talking like a Frankenstein that I love and immediately am just like it's Frankenstein in the Agents of Shade comic book, fantastic, so good. And it's just so funny and also badass the whole time. Like Frankenstein gets torn apart and he still like puts himself back together and comes back and kicks some ass. Like and he's got a giant sword. What else do you need?
Come to think of it, the New 52 really nailed it in retrospect as far as like their supernatural books were concerned, because you had stuff like Justice League Dark, Snyder and Souls run on Swamp Thing. You had Animal Man. You had Demon Knights.
Yeah, they had a good they had that down, and I know that now they try to bank on that, but like they might not bank on that, but like they really had that down at the time. I know all those writers are all over the place now, but that's doing their own thing. But that's how it happens.
Yeah. So as far as the next monster is concerned, we're getting into werewolves now.
Werewolves. So I mean, I'm a big werewolf fan. Also, I think a good werewolf is worth its money. Like I'll forgive a bad werewolf movie if it's got a good werewolf. Like and I think the king of a modern werewolf movie and the king of werewolf transformations has to be the American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, I would say that definitely has the best transformation, and I do love the look of the wolf in that film. But I've
Yeah.
always preferred werewolves that actually stand like on two legs.
Yeah.
I like the more humanoid looking ones.
No, I don't see. I have to disagree with you there. It's like it's cool that they can stand up, but also why wouldn't they be on fours? They're a dog, like they're wolf.
But that's also the division between like wolf and man, and I like the hybrid between the two.
True,
when you
true.
have them as like quadrupeds, they just tend to be just slightly
Big,
more
scary
scarier
wolves.
versions of what you would already see in nature. So,
Okay.
but I like the combination where it's actually, a wolf man.
All right.
I would probably go with, even though, and they both have great effects. An American Werewolf in London definitely has the better transformation. But as far as like werewolf look, that's more to my preferences. I would probably say the Howling.
Oh yeah, the Howling's good. The Howling's a good time. That Ginger Snaps are good vampire. Are good times. Now, yeah, the Howling it just has the right great effects. I think that first off, great title sequence. Second, great effects. I love the Howling's title sequence. It somehow sticks out to me even now. But I think you're gonna hate me for one of my favorite werewolves here, and it's kind of what this movie falls into a lot of these categories. For a young Frank would say, Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman. That movie is not good, and I
No,
loved it.
I used to really like that movie growing up too. It was because it was the only place I could get where it was a big universal crossover, but it was
Yeah.
also actiony bullshit. So Van Helsing is like the comic I always wanted as a kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I get that.
Yeah, I absolutely think it's just it's a great movie if you just kind of check your brain at the door and you just kind of come in being like, hey, this is gonna be some monster mash and good time.
Steven Spielberg's the director is the first two Brendan Fraser mummies, so you kind of get like where he's going with that. So if it has those similar sensibilities. So if you like one, you'll likely like the other.
Yeah. I also I think the weapons are fantastic. I also had a Van Helsing video game, so it was one of those things where I was already into the movie, and then I had the game, and you got a bunch of different weapons in the game that he had in the movie. Like it was great.
Yeah, I totally stole like his like automatic crossbow from my fucking book.
Yeah, I mean, it's dope.
Because I hate writing long range weaponry. I'm a sword guy. Like,
yeah,
I'll write a beautiful sword fight, but when it's just coming down to a fucking arrows, I'm like, eh.
Yeah, I guess you shoot it.
But what if I basically just made this crossbow a gun?
It's
without it being a gun, and I just kind of mess with the rules a bit.
I also love the blade gauntlets from that movie when they shoot out the blades and everything. It's a nuts movie. It's absolutely batshit, and only like the 90s could have created it. I mean, the early 2000s, right? It's early 2000s. I don't fucking remember.
Early 2000s. I think it didn't really do well, so I can't really say it this way, but it's like Blade walked so Van Helsing could run and then fall on its face. Because Blade also has that thing where it's just like, oh, I'm a cool, badass half vampire.
I know. I could probably hear anti-fanboy right now pissed we didn't bring up Blade 2 during our favorite vampires section, like...
You know what? That's actually a good thing to bring up because I really like the Reaper's take on the vampires from Blade 2. With like the Predator like mandible stuff and the tongue.
What's cooler than that?
Guillermo del Toro classic right there.
Oh yeah, that's Guillermo. I mean, Guillermo. Like come on. I absolutely. I just love the werewolves also in in Van Helsing because
as you say that because those are bipedal werewolves as well.
Yeah, I know, but it's the fight, like is that the werewolf brings the fight in that movie, like there's a lot of werewolf movies and they don't do the werewolf fight, like and I know I've seen how Twilight does their werewolf fights and
my least favorite.
But like I really a lot of like werewolf movies don't do the fight, like they either shoot the werewolf or they run for the werewolf or it's tearing people apart. They don't do the brawl with it.
I definitely think it is the right way to do it because I like it when they're fierce and monstrous and kind of like Hulkish.
Yeah.
And with that, you at least have both where it's like they can stand up on their two legs like a bear and fight that way if they need to. But if they really need to like get a run started, they'll go on all fours. So you have both.
Absolutely. I'm getting a text from my wife who's telling me that we're talking shit about horror TV, and we have just finished watching The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, and she's right. That is some of the best horror TV I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, I've watched Hill House. I still haven't watched Bly Manor yet.
Bly Manor's sad as fuck. If you thought Hill House was kind of sad, they're like, hey, we're gonna lean into what death means, and you're like, oh shit, and what it means to actually grieve, and you're like, oh shit.
They definitely got the right idea of making it an anthology about different focuses,
but also bringing back the same actors. It feels like you're watching like a troupe, like a traveling troupe of actors, you know, like because it's the same actors in a bunch of different, completely different roles to what they were in the first one. So you're kind of like, oh wow, okay.
There we go.
But I feel, but I feel like yeah, Haunting a Hill House it will go into our ghost category when we get to like our favorite ghosts because it's fantastic so far. These two anthology bits, I think it's amazing that they did a second season and it was great. You know, like that's what kills me about it. You're like that first season was spectacular, and then you hit me with the second season, and you're like, wow, okay.
You should watch the original black and white Haunting. It's really good.
I will have to. But then there's also the bad horror TV of A Haunting. You know, like there's where they like tell ghost stories. Do you remember that TV show?
No, but I remember like the late 90s, like early 2000s, like remake that they did with Owen Wilson and like Catherine Zeta-Jones and Liam Neeson.
No, but I'm talking about TV shows where they tell like ghost stories and it's just
one of
terrible
those?
reenactments.
Yeah,
like,
I get what you mean.
Yeah, those are not so good way to tell stories, but they are classic. It's classic.
Well, that's just by extension the whole thing with like the line between film and TV like blurring so much in recent years that you can afford to actually do something like that with the amount of polish it should have.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, we were kind of skipped around on werewolves there, but I think we covered it. What's the next category? I mean, we were kind of going into ghosts.
The next one is actually giant monsters.
Giant monsters. I mean, you know who's my favorite. He's right here. He's my friend. It's Godzilla himself. But I got Koozie Godzilla here. I mean, this is not my favorite Godzilla, but Godzilla in general is my favorite giant monster.
Yeah, you could pretty much just fill this whole category with just like choose your favorite kaiju. It could be Godzilla, it could be any of like the big Toho ones, it could be Gamera. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I really do love a lot of monsters. I feel like I feel like we could do this category all day. Giant monsters, talking about kaiju. We could do kaiju all fucking day. But I think the King of the Monsters stands out for a fucking reason. You know, like first off, Godzilla is friend. Second off, Godzilla is best. Third off, Godzilla's king, baby. And it's. And it's because he comes and he hands ass. Like, you know, like a lot of monsters come and they're just like, oh, who's that dude over there? Maybe I'll fight him. But Godzilla comes in and he's just like, who the fuck is that? Why are you here? You're going down.
But what is the scariest Godzilla and why is it Shin?
Why is it Shin? Because the tail does weird shit and his face opens up. You know, like Jesus Christ.
When I did leading up to King of the Monsters, I brought this up before. The same friend that I do the Halloween like marathon with, like nice. Over October, we watched all of the Godzilla films because we were super hyped about King of the Monsters coming out. So we went through all of them. Shin was a surprise because the only thing I had seen for Shin was like the vague trailers when it was first announced, and then saw nothing else afterwards, like posters. So I had seen pictures of him, and I knew his tail was ridiculously long, but that's about it. But then I see his tail's like shooting lasers.
But that's not even the horrifying part. The part at the beginning when he comes out is just like a singular fucking tube thing that's just bleeding on shit.
And there's like blood out of his gills and stuff.
Like, I love Shin Godzilla. I know it's kind of it's such a meta Godzilla movie because it like almost knows it's a Godzilla movie. Well, you know, like
those things where it's because of the director. It's Hideaki Anno, who was the creator of Neon Genesis Evangelion. So you're just like, if you're familiar with his work, you're kind of knowing what you're gonna get.
You know what you're about to get, and it's wild,
weird. But man, that scene where his jaw opened up, we were just like, it's just like, and then it didn't stop there. Just like, okay, he's doing the atomic breath and his mouth opens up. But the fact that atomic breath is so goddamn overpowered, it's just like cutting through buildings and like a thin little laser, just like, well, shit.
well, shit. I think that's the great thing about Godzilla is that you can change him up even slightly and it's fun. You know, like it's just those little things like when Godzilla was going nuclear and somehow he was more powerful. It's like that was super fun, and that that they do that in Desadroya and in
Mhm.
Space Godzilla. They start in Space Godzilla and they do it in Desadroya.
But the thing
But
about
go ahead.
Shin that made him unsettling was just that continuing mutation over the course of the film. Even by the
Right?
end, where you get that hint that there was going to be another one, and you get that shot of the tip of his tail where it looks like humanoid like Godzilla's were growing out of its tail before they froze him, and you're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, you're like, what the fuck? Like it is definitely it's just it's a frightening version of Godzilla. I think there's the original Godzilla has scary Godzilla, and then you have a couple of them where like Tokyo SOS, where he's a villain and he's actually kind of like scary instead of just Godzilla is friend.
Yeah,
Like
all the monsters attack. He's also like the
yes,
straight villain in that.
yes, exactly. And I think Shin really nails the like evil Godzilla, like unstoppable, like what are we supposed to do about this? Like type of feeling that you're supposed to have. Like but yeah, moving on because we're just gonna I feel like there's a lot of good kaiju, and I feel like you could keep going for a very long time here. You could just keep throwing out kaiju, but I feel like Godzilla takes precedence, and that's unless you got another giant friend.
No, the only thing, to be honest, any other things I could mention were only as satisfying as they were because we didn't have any good Godzilla movies. Like Cloverfield is a good movie, but it really hit back then just because we had nothing else.
Yeah, I also I think a shout out for one of the best there's lots of good Godzilla villains, but classic is Hedorah, or the Smog Monster. I love the Smog Monster. He's weird as fuck looking in the movies,
Mhm.
but I just love that he just like pops his top off and is like whoosh, and he's just like a giant like flowing disaster of smog,
Yeah,
like
because
like
there's a lot of environmental like messages in the Godzilla franchise.
yeah. And
Um,
that's definitely one of the ones that just like boop did it
I'd
on the
probably say,
nose.
oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
Like yeah, and
Even
you're
King
like,
of
yeah,
the Monsters
sure.
was like, even in King of the Monsters had like a sloppy, ham-fisted environmental message, which was very on brand. Just like, wow, this really is a genuine Godzilla film.
Now, before we move away from giant monsters, I do want to give shout out to one of the better monsters that might fall into this category is the remake of the Blob. Because the Blob is hard to put in any other category than giant monster.
Yeah, I was thinking of it as more like when we get to the space monster
Oh
stuff,
yeah,
but
true, true.
yeah.
It comes from space. It does. So okay, we'll save that. We'll save
Mhm.
we'll save the Blob for that for moving on. But yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of kaiju here that come from space too.
Shout out
So
to Biolante.
yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, Biolante. There's a reason why that movie is hard to get and it's rare. If you collect Godzilla movies, you know the struggle of getting a good copy of Biolante. For some reason, it's fucking hard, and it's because it's the best looking Godzilla monster. Holy shit, he looks so good. The movie is just one of those that you're just sitting there
She,
being like, woo, like the whole time because he just looks so damn good and keeps
she.
changing. But moving on. What's the
Now
next
we're on
category?
ghosts.
Now we're on what, ghosts?
Yeah, now we're on ghosts.
So obviously the TV ghosts, the haunting, the haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor stand out as being great ghost stories. Movie wise, I mean, it's hard to pick. What's
A lot.
yours?
Because you could go, even if it's not necessarily the ghosts that are scary about the film, you could go Sixth Sense, you could go the others. I think I start to think more like video games, like any of the Silent Hill games. I could pick like his favorite ghosts because they're all
Yeah,
pretty like that.
that's true. There's lots of does a haunted house count as, a ghost, like, because technically it's possessing, like it's one of those things where it's like, poltergeist, does that count, like does, like, because that's a ghost, like, but I wouldn't even choose that. I don't really like poltergeist, to be
I don't
fair.
really care for Poltergeist that much either.
A
It's
lot
a
of people
very
call it a classic, but
great looking film, and it's got amazing like practical effects,
yeah,
but eh,
yeah,
it's not really that effective. It's kind of like a roller coaster ride.
yeah, exactly. You're just like, meh. So what comes to mind as your favorite?
I'd probably go to video games and say stuff like from the Silent Hill games, like the Pyramid Head or the Nurses or anything like that. And not only do they, well, those work not only from a design perspective and that they're scary just by design and they look great, but they also have a psychological reason for existing because it's all part of the main character's psyche.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
Pyramid Head's like inclusion in any other game makes no sense because it's supposed to be tied to that particular type of insanity, but that character got way too popular for its own good.
Yeah, I agree. Where you're just like you're like, this was part of somebody's psyche. Why is it popping up everywhere? You're like,
Because they like it. Put more is
put
the way to
more,
go.
put more. Um, so I mean, this is ghost wise. Do you say Hereditary? Like, does Hereditary count as a ghost? Like,
I
or
wouldn't say so because Hereditary was Pyman, right? So it was more.
yeah,
That's
so it's more a cult thing, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah, so it's not really. I mean, I'm just talking about like her coming back and being like there, like it's, yeah. I mean,
It's
this
tough
one's
because ghost is a very broad, like abstract term. So
it
you can go
is.
you can go a number of different directions with it.
So one movie I have to call out as being a great ghost, like straight up ghost story, and many people might not see this because it's in Spanish. Is The Orphanage? And remember we watched this in college. Remember it was a really fantastic ghost story movie, and it's all in an orphanage, and there's all the ghosts of the little kids and stuff like that. It was quite good. I don't know
It's
if you
kinda like,
remember that.
I do remember it. It reminded me of, like, Devil's Backbone.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I would say it's very similar in that case where it feels like that. Yeah, I think that one stands out as being like a straightforward ghost story and is damn good.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't necessarily have to be scary, you can go into the more creative, like, you could argue, like, the ghosts/zombies, it's hard to define what they are, like, basically the creatures from the fog.
Yeah, the creatures from the
Yeah.
fog.
And if you want to go just sheer fun and just creativity and kind of scary, especially for kids, you can basically look to almost like any episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah, no, I
There's some
agree.
bullshit
Courage
in
the
that
Cowardly
show.
Dog is frightening.
Yeah.
Now, would you put Evil Dead 2 under ghosts or zombies?
I would consider the Deadites closer to zombies than I would
Ghosts
go.
or zombies. Then I mean, I think we gotta go. I think I gotta go back to the zombie thing. Evil Dead 2 is probably my favorite horror movie other than The Thing, and I feel like this is. I feel like those are just amazing. First
I
off,
would
effects,
say
but zombies.
I would say The Shining is definitely a ghost movie too.
Yes, but you can't categorize a ghost, which
Yeah.
is interesting there. I mean, other than you could be like the lady in the bathtub is a frightening moment, and and that's a ghost. Like you're just like, yeah, you're like that's pretty fucked up. But moving on to another category.
Mad Scientist.
Mad scientist. I mean, immediately comes to mind is and you're gonna laugh because this isn't really a horror movie, but it deals with horror icons. Is Young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder as Dr. Frankenstein. I
Dr. Frankenstein.
fucking love that movie, and
So
I
do I.
love his interpretation of a mad scientist. You know, Gene Wilder just being able to like let loose and just be like a kooky fucking himself is fantastic. And I love Young Frankenstein, but it doesn't really count as a mad scientist. But I definitely love that movie and his interpretation of Dr. Frankenstein.
Hmm.
But if I had to pick out of literature, I am a big Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde fan.
Hmm.
If we're talking mad scientists, you know.
That's
And
another
then
one that's like some untapped potential.
yes, very untapped potential. And then movie wise, I think for the most fun, you got to go Reanimator.
That was going to be mine, Herbert West, Dr. Herbert West.
If you I feel like these are this is a set of horror movies that like a lot of people have not seen. Do you agree with me on that? Like this is for some reason
Yeah,
people have not seen the Reanimator.
it's a little more culty than other franchises are.
Yeah, because there's 4 or 5 Reanimators. How many Reanimators are there?
I know only the first two had, if I remember correctly, only the first two had Jeffrey Combs in them, but I think
Yeah,
they made a couple others after that.
yes, they did. I mean Jeffrey Combs, Star Trek, King of Kings.
Star Trek, he's the Question on Justice League Unlimited. Like, he just has an amazing voice, especially as he's gotten older.
Yes, absolutely. Um, yeah. Yeah. I think Reanimator is just first off, he's crazy, he's fun, and the experiments he's doing are just wild, and leads to a really fun movie. You know, like
And even beyond that, it could be easy, and you can go like Dr. Frankenstein, which is definitely the obvious one to pick, but not a
because
bad
we're
one to
talking about monsters here, so we're
pick.
talking about a mad scientist that does
But
something
it's like,
terrible.
but Dr. Frankenstein is a monster based on his creation. But that
Exactly.
also depends on your interpretation, especially if you go by the book.
Exactly. I mean, we're not talking about Rob Williams' character in Flubber here. He's a mad scientist. Or we're not talking Doctor Doofenshmirtz in fucking Phineas and Ferb, like Barry the Platypus. Like you know, like we're not talking Doofenshmirtz.
Mhm.
We're talking people who are actual monsters. You know, like and I feel like Reanimator really captures that, where he's like going so far the whole time, and you're just like, yeah, yeah, he's gone too far. Do you have any other mad scientists that stand out film wise?
The only one film wise, not so much. And I would only bring this up for like the anime fans out there. The the main antagonist of Made in Abyss, I would say, falls under
Ooh.
the category of mad scientist, and he does some horrifying shit.
I definitely need to finish that series. I'm still before anything horrible happens, so I know I haven't even hit any. I'm
You
only like
basically
one
haven't even
episode.
started the show yet.
Yes, I only watched the
That's
first
when the
episode.
show starts, is when it takes that turn.
So I definitely need to watch that show. But moving on to the next category,
Which
which now this one's hard because it's again it falls into ghosts. It falls into a lot of other categories when you're talking about witches, because usually they come with other things that come along.
Mhm.
But I feel like we've had a lot of great witch stories recently in recent memory. You of course bring out The Witch that came out. That's who directed that? That's what's his
Robert
name?
Eggers, I think
Yeah,
his
Robert
name is?
Eggers. Robert Eggers, baby. He's the new king of horror. Please give him all the money. Like please,
New King
please.
of Horror besides Ari Aster.
Yes, 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 yeah, yes, yes. I
Okay, they can
absolutely
all,
agree.
we can have more than one king. It's all right.
Yes, of course. Many kings, many kings. Give them all the money. Uh, I absolutely agree. I think that The Witch is a really effective horror movie, and it's a good modern horror film, which is always something people are looking for. If you haven't seen The Witch yet, it's worth it.
Yeah, which is much like Ghosts fall into that broader category where it can be you could argue it's like any sort of evil woman with magic or some sort of like supernatural element could be a witch. And it's
Yeah,
also one of those things where it's much like Ghost. It's very easy for it to be just the like Halloween store like comical version of it.
yeah. Like most people here would pick Hocus Pocus witches, you know. Like I feel like when they're choosing their favorite witches, a lot of people would be like, "Oh yeah, Hocus Pocus." They're just like, no.
I think if I were to choose a favorite,
Nothing against
and
Hocus Pocus. It's a solid movie.
yeah,
Makes me
nothing
laugh.
against Hocus Pocus. I'd probably be, and this is sort of up in the air as to whether it qualifies as a witch. I would say it definitely does. I'm thinking the other mother from Coraline.
Ooh, yeah, that one's pretty. That one's pretty spooky. That one's pretty spooky. And I think that yeah, it's a hard if that's a witch, but it does fall into that she's doing all that, you know, like
Mhm.
so it's like she does have the power. I also it's kind of a hard category because most of the time the witch brings in something, you know, like I feel like that's kind of also important about witches is that the like scared part, you know, like the public consciousness is that witches commune with the devil, you know, like so they're obviously bringing in something. So
Yeah, they're like means to the end, but they're not necessarily the primary threat. They like introduce the primary threat.
yeah, exactly. Like I mean, when I'm talking about the witch, the movie, it's not really like the witch is scary, but really what's scary is that they bring it's like it's Satan, you know, like you know, like it's the devil, like, you know, like that's you're like oh that's the devil right there. I of recent watch, I watched The Ritual on Netflix, which again really good. If you haven't seen it, but this is a hard one where it's like there's a witch here, but really it's the monster in the woods that makes this the scary part, you know, like the thing she summons is what's the, you know, like is the bat, you know, like the fucked up part of the movie. But obviously, you know, they're doing weird shit, you know, like the witches in the woods, you know, doing weird fucked up shit.
Yeah.
Comics wise, you have to give a shout out to Scott Snyder's The Witches. Holy shit. I can't wait till they make that into a series eventually, because they will. They absolutely will. There's no question in my mind that we'll get a the witches thing
It's gonna
from.
be another case of where people are like, "Have you heard about the witches?" Like, "Yeah, I read it years ago. Where have you been?"
Where have you been? But it's true. I think if it hasn't, I know they were trying to make one years ago, so I'm sure that it'll come eventually. Because they're always looking for a graphic novel that they can turn into a horror movie, and which is definitely one of them. Holy shit, with them being shoved in the trees, fuck.
The other
It's
thing
a
I was thinking
spoiler
of
alert, but damn, that book is scary.
the other thing I was thinking of was, Suspiria, because I just watched the remake a couple nights
See,
ago.
I
Really.
yeah. Does that count as a witch? Like,
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean, yeah.
totally. Both movies are.
Okay, all right. I haven't seen it in a very long time. It's been like before college. I watched the original Suspiria, so I'll have to rewatch sometime soon. It's definitely one of those that I don't remember much, but I know it's a classic.
Yeah, the remake is, very different, a lot darker, and I actually think I like it more.
Really?
And I really like the original. I like Dario Argento in general,
Huh.
but the remake was just so primal and so fucked up and really, like, leaned into the occult, like, hardcore compared to the first one that
Yeah,
made me more interested.
that's
The first
interesting.
one's more of a slow build because it's just like, "Oh, it's this girl, she came over here to do ballet, but things are kinda weird around here," and it's a slow burn to be like, "Am I in a school of fucking witches?"
Yeah, right. Is this a
Whereas,
school of?
like, the remake is more just like Dakota Johnson's just like, "I think I'm in a school of witches, but I'm kind of into it." And
Yeah,
you're like,
but
"Oh, shit."
That's funny. I'll definitely have to rewatch the original and then rewatch the remake now. But moving on to the next category, sir.
Next one, if my list would load faster, is, Space Monster.
Space Monster. Now this is I mean, of course, a hard category because we've already almost breached into it several times. We talked about kaijus, which most of the time come from space, except for Godzilla, which is most of the time a nuclear explosion. But, you know, like, or something like that. But most of the time, you have to bring up, with space monsters, I think you got to bring up the King Ghidorah. Because he's obviously from space. He's Monster X. He's from the fucking moon
I'm
originally.
shocked that King of the Monsters actually kept that.
Right? They were just like, they're like, yeah, he's still from space. And you're just like, yes.
Because they already had the like out would be like, whatever. They're the Titans.
It's a Titan.
They lived underground, blah, 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 blah. But the fact that they're just like, no, Ghidorah's from space. Like, oh, so you guys actually just went for it. All right.
I mean, I'm going to bring up King Ghidorah just because he's the king. I think you got to bring him up. But I think when we're talking space monsters, I think there's two more I have to mention. The Blob, which we're talking about. It's usually a meteor that comes down, hits down, and then just completely takes over the town with this gelatinous size. And I love, first off, I love the original. I'm so tempted to buy it on the Criterion Collection. They got a Criterion of it, and I'm like, just put the remake in with it, and I'll buy it. You know, like I just want both. Like,
get the original from Criterion, and you can get the remake from Shout Factory.
Oh, see, there you go. See, advice from this show. If you weren't already learning, here it is. You can literally buy both. But I first off, I love the original Blob. I think it's a classic monster. It looks good. It's such a ridiculous concept. Like, you know,
Oh, it's silly.
It's so silly,
but it's so creative.
And they do such fun with it, and they have some famous actor in it. The original, I forget his name at the moment. I'm forgetting, but the remake in the '80s is like, so they were like, okay, that movie happened. Let's put all the '80s magic practical effects in one movie and do the Blob hard, you know, like they do the Blob so stone face in that movie, you know, like there's definitely moments where they're like, this is silly, but they do it like so stone face and so like, yeah, this is gonna be fucking disgusting. And that's why I love the remake. You're just like, you're like, okay. But then the third monster I think you have to talk about is the Xenomorph. I think when you're talking space monsters, how do you not talk Xenomorph?
Yeah, I mean, that's the proverbial alien to the point where that's pretty much what it's called.
Whoa,
I mean,
whoa.
People don't know
and this
what
is another moment where they hit the nose, right?
Yeah, just because of the title. If the general public, when I run into people who don't know what the word xenomorph is, they'll say the alien from Alien.
You're like, oh yeah, because yeah, that guy with the nose over there. Yeah, sure, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. But even then, beyond the xenomorph, you also have the Thing, which I would argue is a fairly, in a lot of places, similar concept to the Blob, but much more effective.
Yes, I think that's why. I think when we're talking best horror movies, I always go the Thing, and I always. And there's a reason. This is, first off, a scary monster on that it looks great. It looks so good when it's moving around. It's always changing forms. Somehow you can still tell it's the Thing, even though every time you see it, it's different and mutated. It adds this existential dread of like, oh my God, what, you know, like who is it? Who's become the Thing? You know, like, yeah. And then you also just have the whole, like, you can't beat it, you know, like there's just nothing you can do about this thing other than set it on fire, which I don't, you know, who knows if you actually did it, you know, like, you know, like,
yeah. And it also has the advantage of it's been pulling pieces from, who knows, countless other species that it is likely infected and impersonated and taken with it. So that's why you have scary stuff when it's transforms and it looks like nothing you've ever seen. Exactly. So it's actually a bunch of creatures in one.
Exactly. I mean, the Thing is a masterclass in practical effects. I think I think everyone knows that. The Thing is just one of those movies that you watch and you're just, if you're not disgusted by what's going on, you're blown away. Like
Yeah.
you're just like, holy shit, that's amazing. Look at that. Like it's almost so disgusting you don't want to pause to look at the effects, but you want to because you're like, holy shit. Like
When a big
it's
baby.
but it's disgusting looking, and that's what's so
Yeah.
great about it. Like is that they get this like visceral feeling of disgust from you when you look at it because it doesn't look human. It's like the uncanny valley thing where it's like it looks like something but not at all because it's inverted. Because the thing doesn't know what to do. Like it doesn't know how to put all those parts in the right spot sometimes. Like
Yeah.
and you're just like
And there is a running thing I noticed with the best space monsters is that they have some sort of like viral quality to them, like the
yeah.
literal definition of viral, because you have the xenomorph, which is birthed from a face hugger. That's like an infection of something that grows inside you. You have the blob, which sort of has a similar concept of the thing, and the thing in and of itself is like a virus.
I think because as humans we are scared of getting sick, like, and then you put the thing about space, it works the same as a submarine or an underwater movie, is that there's nowhere to go. Like or underwater. I mean, just a boat at all. Like is that there's nowhere to go. Like when you're stuck on this thing and somebody gets sick, it's going to spread. Like it's going to get around, and that's why I think Alien capitalizes on, and so does the thing, is that like they're stuck. Like they're not going anywhere. There's nowhere to go, and this thing's just one by one infecting them. Like taking them apart, and I think there's something to be said about space in that way. That like, what are you gonna do? You can't just fucking leave. You can't walk out the door. Like
Yeah, and just go home.
can't go home. Like that's that. I think that adds the extra scary to the space monsters, is that there's nowhere to escape to anyways with the monster, but then you make the infection feel, and it's like, and
Yeah.
it feels inevitable. Like
Also, another one that ticks that box is Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
yes. Now Invasion of Body Snatchers, I'm not I've watched them. I watched pretty much all the remakes of Invasion's Body
I
Snatchers
love
because
the
there's a lot of
70s.
them.
I love the 70s one with Donald Sutherland.
Oh yeah, that one's the good one. I think there's who's in that? The new one from like it was the 2000s. Was that
No idea, because it was another version, so it doesn't matter. It's a version that wasn't the 70s one, so why should I care?
Yeah, you got a point. That one first off has great practical effects, and second, it Sutherland is fantastic in it.
And there is no happy ending to that one.
Yep, they're just like, nope, fucking dead. They took us all.
Yeah.
I absolutely I think that's the best of the Body Snatchers ones. There's
But as
like
far as best space monster, I would settle on the Thing, just because it has that perfect defense mechanism. And the thing that works, the thing that works about the Thing, is that none of the cast are dumb.
yes.
They don't fall into that traditional horror cast where the characters kind of have to act stupid in order for the plot to happen. Like, these guys just act like people would and react like people would, even when they panic and do stupid things. It's well within reason.
Yeah.
That's something someone would do. And the fact that it gets one over on them in the film ends ambiguously. So imagine if it got to the mainland, like, it's over.
Yeah, no, I think that's why it works so well, is that these are not it's a horror movie that isn't like making you be like, don't go in there, like, like like these are smart people, they're trying their best to stop this, like, and it still gets them.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it stands out as one of the best horror movies, because you're not sitting there being like, why would they do this? Why would they do this? Why are they, going into that room? Why are they going to that basement? Like you do with a lot of movies. I watched The Lodge recently on Hulu. I don't know if you've seen that one. Came out in 2019. It had been talked up to me, and I really did like the movie. There's a lot to like about it, cinematography wise, plot wise, good plot twists. But but it's one of those things that I still felt like they were stupid, you know, like even though they had reasonable explanations for some of these things, you were like, oh, that's a stupid move, you know, like,
Mhm.
oh no, you know, like, don't do that, you know, like, and when a movie makes you go be like, don't do that, it sometimes that's effective, but most of the
Like,
time I just get frustrated, you know, like, you're like, don't do that, you
yeah.
know.
Sometimes you end up with the cast from Prometheus where you're just like, all of you are fucking morons and you're supposed to be scientists. You had the map. How did you not know how to get through this cave? You were the guy with the map.
Right? You're like, what? Uh, oh, let's not talk about Prometheus. We'll just be like xenomorphs, alien, and aliens. Done.
That's it.
No more. No mas. I mean, Alien vs Predator, but that's it. That's we're done after that. All right, Alien versus Superman, but that's it. That's where I draw the line. Give me that movie.
What about the Alien versus Predator versus like Batman fan film on YouTube? I love that.
Okay, you got me there. That one's fine.
Moving on. Next creature is another broad one, is the child monster.
The child monster. Now this one's a classic, just freaks people out. I feel like this is people don't like when a little child is just straight up evil. Like, you know, like that is just freaks people out. It's classic. It's easy. It happens in most horror movies where a kid will say a creepy thing or be straight up taken over or possessed. You know, like now what is your like scariest like child monster? You know, like
It's tough because I'm thinking about so many movies that freaking do it.
there's a lot of them.
Like you can have stuff like Sadako and Kayoko from The Ring and The Grudge, which also fall into the ghost category, but they're
Yep.
both.
Yep.
That's another thing. You can have maybe not necessarily scary versions, but that's where like characters come
Or
in.
what
But I
about
would
Sam from Trick or Treat? That I
like
think
yeah, Trick
he's
or
a
Treat.
kid. You know, like I would say he's kind of a ghost too. So I mean, he falls into a bunch of categories.
And you also have ones that aren't necessarily scary, but fall into like a great character premise, like Ellie from Let the Right One In or Claudia
Yeah.
from Interview with the Vampire.
Yeah, I agree. Those are straight up just like good, like scary child characters. You're just
Mhm.
like, ooh. I think there's two here that I mean, The Exorcist is obvious. You know,
Yeah.
like for me, it's The Exorcist is one of they do such a good job of making you scared of Regan. You know, like it's she's just like totally taken over and makes it really scary. And it's of course a classic pick, but it's one of those things that I think it's one of those movies that inevitably will stay with you, you know, like and I think that she does such a good job in that movie that it's commendable.
Mhm.
And I think I also love and I know you don't love this, but it's one of those things that inspired me when I was young was and that's a weird thing to say, but Halloween, the Rob Zombie remake, the young Michael Myers, like him going around and like putting hurt on people and being disturbing and scary.
No,
He
I
it's
like the Rob Zombie Halloween film. I like the first one. I don't love it, but I like it.
Yeah, I love it because I think that that's the scary part to me, you know, like is that it's just like a kid in a situation and he's pushed so far and you're just like you're just like hey no like and I really do think that first off the original Halloween does a good job of being scary with a child, you know,
Mhm.
like the original like just that first shot is so effective about portraying like this scary child vibe that I think you have to give a shout out to the original. But the Rob Zombie remake has it amps that up like everything else in that movie. It amps it up to 10 and then takes it so far that you're just like, oh shit, oh lordy.
It's just more fun than scary in retrospect, just because of its age. But I do love the little boy from the original Pet Cemetery.
Yes. Oh, he's scary in that too.
Yeah,
So when
he's fun.
I mean, I always say it, but when he slices the ankles, you're just like, oh, like it's
And
just one of
then
those like visceral practical effects that makes you be like clutch your ankles when it happens. You're like, ooh, that would fucking hurt. Like one of those
another
practical effects that makes you go, ah, Jesus. Like,
another fun one, not more fun than scary from a movie I don't think holds up at fucking all is Isaac from Children of the Corn.
yes, I know. I mean, yes, you're exactly right. It's like Children of the Corn is scary, but it doesn't hold up. Like I
At
feel like
all.
at the time it was probably like, whoa, like this is frightening, like but now it's just so silly. But he does such a good job at being like a scary kid. Like that's definitely one of them. Does the kid from the Babadook count? I feel like Babadook doesn't get brought up enough, and I mean,
Uh,
ghost
I
wise,
had a I had
definitely
a
one of my favorite
visceral
ghost
I had a
stories.
visceral reaction because that's like the Babadook is the ultimate don't have children PSA. And that kid,
Why can't you
God,
be
that kid,
normal?
that
Ah!
that kid is so good in that film, and the Babadook is such a good movie. And the fact that like the monster is sort of a representation of her anxiety of taking care of this kid and like
Yeah,
her dark desires to get this kid out of her life. That's good, but it's not necessary. It's more on the metaphorical side, so it's a little weirder. But I
yeah,
wouldn't.
no,
He's more just like grating than scary, and the Babadook is sort of its own
its
thing.
own thing.
But
Yeah,
what I would throw into the ring is Charlie from Hereditary.
yeah, yeah. I don't like her. I don't. I
Nope,
hate to be
no, nope.
mean, but I don't like her. I don't. It's kind of like I don't get that feeling from I watched The Omen and I'm not there as the 70s audiences obviously were for The Omen and they think it's a huge classic. I get it. It's sort of freaky, but I think Rosemary's Baby did it so much better than The Omen,
Yeah,
and I think Hereditary does The Omen so much better because what's the kid's name in The Omen? It's I
I get
forget.
it.
Who cares? But I think Charlie does that broken kid aesthetic so much better. Like obviously evil kid, and you're just like, like
Charlie is the kid that parents are afraid their kid will turn into watching scary movies.
yes, that's exactly it. You're just like, no, don't do it. Don't watch the spooky movies. Um, so-
Aside from that, there's really just like maybe the Grady twins from, not even twins, just the Grady sisters from The Shining.
yeah,
But that's really
that's
just like one moment, but it sticks with you. There's a reason it's iconic.
yeah. Maybe the little sisters from BioShock if we're talking video games.
I
That's
don't
pretty
find the little
spooky.
sisters. I don't. The little sisters are creepy. I don't really find them all that scary,
No, I
especially
wouldn't
given
say
that.
scary, but they're kind of like freaky, like
Yeah,
like that you want to save them, but you're kind of like Jesus Christ, like just like you're like no, don't come near me, please don't do that. Um, I also have on this list I forgot to bring it up earlier, but Planet Terror zombies are some of my favorite zombies just because they're pus filled. I'm a big fan of the giant pus zombies from Planet Terror. I know that is nothing to do with this topic, but I was looking through a list trying to find scary kids, and I was like, oh yeah, Planet Terror, fuck yeah. But and I that's definitely one of my favorite zombie movies, just because it leads into like the full silly of it all. You're just like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. um,
I think we've
but
we've definitely covered like the big ones.
yeah, I think so too. I feel like there's a bunch of scary kids. I feel like like you got it chapter 1. You got um what's it's like it's not really him though. It's like Pennywise manipulating him.
Mhm.
Like so it doesn't really count. But they do have some scary kids in that movie, so you're just kind of
Yeah,
like,
scary kids are, especially in like modern horror films, are kind of a dime a dozen. It's gotten to the point where it's very, very tired.
yeah. And I think you can blame uh I think you can blame Nightmare on Elm Street for bringing it in and then really like not caring that's there, the spooky kids, with the girl
Um,
singing the song. Like, she's always in the movies to sing the song and make it
yeah,
creepy, but you're
that's
kind of
always
like,
like, but they're never like the main threat.
no.
That's always like seasoning. That's just like a
Yeah.
bit of world building.
Yeah, a little bit of creepy kids adds a little
Yeah.
bit of something, something. you know,
Just sprinkle creepy kids on your horror movie just a little bit.
just a little
Don't make
bit.
it the main dish. It's a condiment.
Exactly. And yeah, no, I think kids, it's like, it's hard because a lot of horror movies, when they deal with kids, it's hard to, like it's like, you can't. It's hard. You can't kill a kid most of the time, like, and that's what's. I think is part of it. Like, is that there's like this like morality thing to the kids, is that they're scary, but like you don't want to kill them. Like like, even though if they're a spooky zombie or something at the time, like, you don't want to kill the kid. Oh,
Yeah.
there is plenty of kid zombies, and I feel like that's always a winner, like when
I think of the baby from the remake of Dawn of the Dead, the Zack Snyder one.
oh yeah, you're just like, no, dude, no. But moving on, do we have any more categories, or is the spooky
The
children-
last one is just a robot.
robot? I threw this one on because I feel like you gotta be like, who's the spookiest robot of them all, like, so what comes to your mind when you're talking about spooky robots?
Probably the T-800 from Terminator 1, because that film is basically a slasher movie with a killer robot.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I like T1 so much. But
Yeah,
the T-1000 and T2 is pretty scary. Even
Yeah,
that,
no,
even
I
if
think
that's primarily an action film, like the T-1000 is a frightening thing.
Yeah, he just keeps coming, like, he doesn't really stop. And, like, that's kind of like, oh, shit. You're just like, no. Like, make it stop. I feel like I have to give a shout out to Chopping Mall. They have there's this terrible movie on Amazon Prime that's came out in the 80s, and it was with the slasher phrase where and they had kids breaking into malls, or like getting trapped in the mall, and they have a security robot that goes wild and just fucking starts murdering the kids. And holy shit, what a fun time. Definitely worth the watch if you're into like slapstick slasher, like, you're just like, yeah, you're like, yeah, totally. But I think when you're speaking robots, it's not really the bloodthirstiest of the robots that's scary. It's the robots that don't help you that are the scariest. I automatically think of Moon, with his robot there and not helping him and everything, kind of lying to him, like, and same thing with 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like
HAL 9000, yeah, that definitely counts.
That definitely counts. Like, he takes it a little too far, and you're like, oh shit.
I would say for video games, shout out to the Working Joes from Alien Isolation.
Yeah, those are, and I mean, you have to give a shout out to even though Prometheus is bad, you have to give a shout out to Michael. Yeah, Fassbender's Damien is so good, like, and so is the original android from Alien. He's
Ash.
Ash is scary. Ash is like, you're like, fuck no. Like,
I quote Ash with my buddy Alex all the time. Where, like, anytime a situation calls for it, will be like, I won't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathies. Or the, like, anytime we like something, perfect organism. I admire its purity. And I mean, Ash was so like intimidating in the original film that they used Bishop as a red herring for Aliens,
Yeah,
where he
exactly.
seems kind of suspicious, but then he turns out that he actually is good after all.
Yeah, no, and that's I love that about that movie is that they kind of play with your expectations with that, you know, like you're like, oh, I know the android's bad, you know, like and you're like, no,
It
no.
seems, yeah, but despite how bad Prometheus is, like Fassbender's performance in both those movies are fantastic. And it even seems like Ridley Scott loves David as a character way too fucking much because he
Yeah,
retroactively made him the reason Xenomorphs exists in
yeah,
Alien
right.
Covenant, and I want to shoot myself.
You're like, please no, like, please don't do this to us, Ridley Scott, and he's
Yeah,
like,
it's
nah,
ridiculous.
nah. Oh man, I really do. Killer robots are hard to do. I feel like it's hard to make them scary. You know,
Mhm.
like that's definitely one of those things that like,
Oh,
oh,
Gladys.
who?
Gladys.
Oh, yep, Gladys. Yeah, I think you have to give it to Gladys. I feel like video games. Again, this is another genre that video games does right better than movies with
Mhm.
scary robots. I feel like it happens a lot more in video games where it turns out to be a robot. You know, like I feel like it happens almost. You know, happen. Same thing in comics sometimes too. Sometimes it just turns out it's Brainiac. You know, like after everything. You know, like you
Yeah.
know, like you're like, oh shit, who did all this? Oh, it was Brainiac. You know, like Final Crisis is all just like, but how scary could we make Brainiac? And you're like,
Final Crisis is a lot of things.
it's a lot of things, but is the scariest version of that. Uh, but moving on, we've gone through some of our scariest monsters we could think of. And guys, if you have ones you want to bring up, please let us know. Please comment down below in either YouTube, Facebook, at all the podcasting sites. Please comment, talk to us. We are also on Twitter. I'm Yupfrank on Twitter.
I'm Modcrack on Twitter.
And we also, of course, are on galaxygeek.com. And that's where you can find all of our content. And if you want to find all of our shit, that's where it is. And I feel like it's important that we were talking about science fiction right at the end because I'm guest starring on a podcast called Funny Science Fiction Podcast. In a short bit, I did a guest star with them, and they sent me this awesome mug about giving to the Red Shirt, a Widow and Orphans Fund.
That's fantastic.
I love that, and they're really funny, really great guys, and I absolutely please check out their podcast and please check it out when I'm on it. I think it's coming out in November. I'm not exactly sure, so it might be after all our spookiness here. But thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with us. Please check us out, comment, like, everything, and we're everywhere. You know how it is. If you're watching this, there's obviously links to more of this stuff around. But thank you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
We'll see you next time.